There's one team left. I've left till the end, the big dogs, FaZe. Because here's the problem. If they'd have won one more bloody round, it'd be a totally different convo we'd be having now, wouldn't it? It'd be like, fucking hell, is it back on? Is the era on? They've won the tournament. And how many events were there in 2022? What can we call it? I'd have been fully in my bag, don't worry about it, boys. And spoiler, I would have won about $8,000 or something fucking ridiculous style, thanks to them just blowing it completely there. Because I did everything. I had like the outright winner, I had the winner of the final, I did it all. So cheers, Cadian. Thanks for that, you fucking rat. Whatever. Anyway, probably did cheat all those years ago, if I had to guess. Nah, who knows about that? I'll leave that up to 100 and Isak to not figure out. So, right, come on then, Ting T. What are your thoughts on FaZe, though? Because this is another one where, I mean, I feel like a lot of people are ready to bail on FaZe.
I'm not there. I was, obviously, like everyone, shocked, appalled, horrified, what other words you want to use, at the major. And Blast, yeah, they didn't win it. It wasn't convincing, even some of their wins, but it was better. It was more like the FaZe we'd kind of gotten used to. It never has to be that they just smash you. They just eventually win. And that's kind of what we started to see again at Blast. And I think here, they might not be the bookies' favourites, who apparently still value Heroic. This is the problem.
And that's so weird.
I haven't updated to esports, it seems. Like, I've raked it in betting on esports the last few years. But FaZe, I still think should be favourites here. Honestly, you look at everyone else, FaZe's turmoil is they didn't perform at the major, and they've had a bit of a streak of events where they weren't great, but the roster still works. The roster makes sense. Coming to this event, they had a pretty good uptick from their last one. I think this is it. They should be favorites here. I haven't picked them to win it just because it was funnier not to at the time, but I think, yeah, on paper, they're definitely favorites. And yeah, a team to be afraid of. Anubis coming in hasn't really messed them around too much. They're still going to be able to pick the maps they like to pick and have series go their way in the veto for the most part. So yeah, FaZe for me, no doubts, no worries really. They should be fine here.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that FaZe should be the favorites to win the entire tournament. There's no reason why they shouldn't be. And I think in the fall finals, it was very reminiscent of all the tournaments that they've won thus far, and it was on track to be that way, bar that final series. And I mean, you even had like the crazy Rops 4K 14-14 money going to break if Rops goes down and he pulls out a rabbit out of the hat on the lower bomb side of Nuke. And yet still they lose that very close series against Heroic, and we would have had a different scenario for sure. But regardless, I think the identity of FaZe is back, and that in and of itself has me feeling like they can edge out basically any team that is in the pool right now. I don't think they'll have any trouble in their group by any means. I think they'll get pretty comfortably out. And then from then on, you've got Na'Vi, Vitality, and Heroic. Na'Vi again in flux, Heroic with their stand-in scenario, and Vitality, which who the hell knows what kind of Vitality we're going to be getting at the tournament. And so overall, I don't feel like there is genuinely a threat that I could say at the peak of their powers, this could be a team that just absolutely topples FaZe. I mean, sure, there are still some underlying issues with kind of Brokey in certain scenarios doesn't necessarily make the right decision, and you can definitely see that he cost FaZe a lot of rounds in that final against Heroic, but you still have the two of the best riflers that you could ask for right now in the world in Rops and Twists. And overall, they're doing serviceable enough jobs that the system still works as intended, and their identity still seems intact, and they still seem like the FaZe of old that can outclutch any team that's thrown at them. Heroic definitely being an outlier in that scenario rather than kind of the end-all be-all as to what we should be thinking about FaZe.
I actually do have FaZe winning this event. I actually do think they're still the best team overall. Like, I look at the squad, none of the players are really bad. Like, no one's really had a slump. It's just people had individual matches or tournaments that they weren't as good. Even Rain actually was picking it up again for the Blast finals that they almost won just now. Like, the actual team in general still seems like it works. You look at the major, it was 1BO3, and even then, by the way, they were leading massively on the third map, and they almost won, and they lost an OT. Like, it's not like they got beaten and smashed by BNE or something like that. And then the other thing for me is, I actually think it's key that we mentioned the map pool with this team, right? they're a team that could easily afford Dust 2 to go out. There wasn't some like awesome map for them. It was just a whatever map that they played if the other team picked it, basically. So I actually think when you look, first of all, Carrigan's already someone who always has some like weird angle on the veto and how he fucks around with it. He's even been working Vertigo into the mix the last few months. By the way, that now looks like genius, that you actually started to play the map at least and played it even against beginning at the major. And look, you weren't great, but you weren't terrible either. You almost won the map. It was OT. I actually think they already had overall the best map pool. I think they still do at this point in time. Like as we're saying, think about this, right? If I had to pick, like in this type of a map pool, even the one we had with Just 2, right, which maps would I want to be the best at? Inferno and Nuke would be my instant picks. Like, everyone plays those maps. What are you talking about? Like that's perfect. So I think if you look at it all the way around, I think it's still overall the best team. I understand why people are apprehensive. They're not like a clear-cut number one team right now. But I even think, I'll weave this last angle in, the fact that the last two big events were won by Outsiders and Heroic, well, no one's saying they're better than FaZe. I noticed that key detail. So if they're not better, then realistically, if those are one-off teams that won, isn't FaZe just de facto still the best? And Snarvy's kind of shit, Vitality's mega up and down, Liquid hasn't really got that. You know what I mean? Like, when you run down the others, yeah, it's hard to make the case like FaZe is at their peak, but the others just fall away and they sort of just win by default for me. So I actually think this tournament as well, just like the last Blast one, the other reason I had them winning the Blast Fall finals is I think this format is, if you are the number one, the real best team, this is the best format you can have. Beyond having like a real full double elim bracket, it's everything's best of three, only one team goes out the group. Oh, it's awesome. Like, if you actually are the best, this is where you should win in this format. So I'm going to take FaZe to win the whole thing personally. Any final remarks before we shut it off?
I think Anubis is definitely going to be a very interesting map in the pool, but as we've discussed previously, FaZe shouldn't be affected by that when you have maps like Inferno and Nuke, and no matter what the scenario is going to be, it'll most likely end up with FaZe going into a 3-map series, and they'll definitely be comfortable to edge it out. So I think there should be no issues with outlying circumstances, and even with the kind of changes that are being presented to FaZe this time around, I think they're still the best team here.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.